Hello and welcome to AWS On Air. I am your host, Brian Terry, the DA from CloudFormation, and I'm joined here with Chad, my co-host. Chad, how
Hey,
would you
everybody.
introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey, everybody. It's good to see you. Glad you're with us. My name's Chad Lacey. I'm a global sales strategist with AWS, and happy to be here. And we're here with Heggy. Heggy's like the serverless guru. Why don't you introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. My name is Higgy Park. I'm a principal solutions architect, and I focus on serverless here at AWS, and I cover our global and strategic accounts. And I'm happy to be here.
Sweet.
Very cool. Higgy, I am so excited to talk to you about your solution, and I'm sure our audience is too. So what are we talking about today?
Yeah, sure. So with my customers, we often think about, one, how do we build an architecture based on serverless services, and we'll talk about a few of them today. And then the second one that a lot of my customers tend to talk about is how do we build this to be resilient? And we think about what does that look like in a multi-region architecture? So I have a little demo today where we'll look through one of our services, a new feature announcement, and how we build out a multi-region architecture using serverless.
Sweet.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. I'm excited to hear about it. So let's get into it. Let's see what you got.
Yeah, so with my customers, when we're building serverless architectures, there's kind of three common patterns. I've got the titles there, but I'll kind of use simpler terms. When we talk about API microservices, you can think about I just want to make a request to an endpoint and get some information back. And oftentimes we call these like REST APIs. The middle one we call it orchestrated workflows. A simple way to think about it is think about like a state machine, or just more simply, I have a business process. Step A goes to step B goes to step C, and produces some type of output. So we want some discrete flow of activities, and that's what we would call an orchestrated workflow. Contrast that with a choreographed workflow, where it's more about we want to decouple, actors within a system. So you have, maybe someone producing some message. So for example, I'm in a website and I'm clicking in and I want to track that clickstream data as an example. Or maybe I have an IoT device. Maybe I'm driving a self-driving vehicle, and that self-driving vehicle is emitting GPS telemetry data as an example. That would be kind of events coming in, but it doesn't really care about who's acting on that later on. And so maybe we want to have rules that then process or send it to someone who will actually consume those events. So those are three kind of patterns that I often see with my customers.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So, can I think of this as like, I design this application and this application is emitting these data. Basically, these three patterns are what I would try to build for my backend to process that data or handle that data.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, with these, oftentimes the starting place for a lot of these would be I'm going to build it within a single region. So for example, I'll build it in US East 1. But some of my enterprise customers will say, you know what, I want to be fault tolerant and resilient across regions. So I want to think about, maybe I'm going to be in US East 1 and also maybe in US West 2 as well. So in the event of some type of failure or problem, we can very easily move to another region.
Oh, that's very interesting. I mean, that's really cool. I mean, we're talking about like a well-architected solution here, right?
Yeah.
We're going across multiple regions, and yeah, that's super exciting.
Yeah. So
I was to say, I think one of the inherent advantages of serverless over your traditional three-tier architecture is it's easier to roll this out in a multi-region, right, without consuming as many resources and building out all the different tiers everywhere.
yeah, absolutely. And my goal today is to do a quick demo. I want to show you a little bit of some of the problem statements that my customers are working through, and then I can walk you through a demo of actually how to build this. Right. So I'll show you a couple templates, and then I'll do a demo of actually doing a regional failover.
Cool. I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, excited.
Cool. So before we get to the demo, though, I just want to set the stage a little bit of what's the problem that we're trying to solve for. Right. So if you'll bear with a couple of slides, 1 second. All right, so if we look at this, this is the basic idea of what we're trying to accomplish here. Like I mentioned, maybe there's a vehicle that's emitting telemetry data, or maybe you have a web browser that's emitting data. There are these things in the middle. Let's not complicate it too much. You can just think of these event buses as a place where these events will land. And these buses will then allow you to trigger what we call a rule. These rules then will then define what's the compute behind it, that will actually take action on those rules. So again, let's think about our vehicle telemetry data example, right? So I'm emitting GPS data. That's going to go into, let's say, my default event bus, and then maybe we're going to trigger a Lambda function, right? And that's kind of the demo that we're going to go through today. When my customers are thinking about like multi-region, they're thinking about, where can things break? Where are the failure scenarios? And so for me, there's generally 3 areas that it may break. We'll just go through this quickly. One is on the producer side. So let's say my vehicle has some problem. Maybe there's something that is preventing it from being able to emit that data. The next one would be service failures. So in this case, this is Amazon EventBridge. So maybe there's a service issue or problem with EventBridge. And then the last one would be a target failure, right? So in our case, we're going to think about Lambda. So what happens if there's a problem within Lambda or within the code within Lambda, right? Really quick, there's these 3 general categories. These are just ways that we can think about addressing these problems. And what we're going to focus in part of our demo today is this middle one, the service failure. So how do we do multi-region failover? So again, let me just do a quick architecture diagram, and then we'll get into the demo of what we're going to actually show. So here on this global endpoint, this is kind of the happy path, right? And so the primary region on the left is an example of what we would be running, let's say, in US East 1, right? And this is where the primary activity would happen. And we have this standby region. This should be secondary region in US West 2 as an example, right? And so right here, we have this health check with Route 53 telling me, is my primary region, US East 1, healthy? And in the happy path, it is. And so this, what we call this global endpoint, or basically this universal entry point for my application, it will then forward the request to my US East 1 event bus. Again, that landing place for those events. Then we'll have a rule, as I'd shown before, that actually triggers a Lambda function, which we'll demo shortly. And that Lambda function will then write it to a DynamoDB table, right? So it's fairly straightforward. In this case, what we're doing is we're using a global table as well, because what we want to do is we want to take care of the multi-region concern.
Okay.
Yeah, this is super interesting. I love it how like all these pieces of this architecture is completely decoupled. Even in your previous slide, you saw that you can have a producer, but it can go to multiple channels, and one of those channels can have a failure, but you still get that data. So this is really cool.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, and so one of the other things too is our customers sometimes will want to optionally replicate that data to the other region, just to make sure that in the event there is a failure and you're in the middle of processing something, that we don't lose anything.
Right.
Right. So this is the happy path. Let's say not so happy path. So here's kind of what I'm calling the sad path. Right? This right side should say secondary region, so my apologies. But now we're sad. Right. So now we're having a problem here in US East 1. That Route 53 health check will notify and say, you know what, I can't reach my event bus here in US East 1, so now it's all gray. And after a certain period of time, and we'll demo this, it takes about 3 to 4 minutes. You can imagine similar to like an EC2 health check. After it's going to fail a certain number of health checks every 30 seconds, as an example.
Yeah.
Now the endpoint will redirect to a new event bus, or the secondary event bus in US Bus 2. And you can see it's essentially everything now in revert, where we have an event consumer, and we're writing to that global table. Cool. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's
does.
super cool. Yep, got it.
Cool. So I'm sure this is what all of you care about more is let's go into the demo.
Let's see it in reaction, man.
Yes.
All right. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you a little bit of how to build it. So I know that maybe in this audience, not everyone's a developer. Hopefully some of you are a developer. If not, maybe this can be an intro into how we start to build some of these services. So what I've decided to use in this demo is we're using CloudFormation, but we're also using what we call a serverless application model, or SAM for short. And again, as a serverless developer, SAM provides me with a number of shortcuts and some CLI tools that make the developer experience a little bit easier. So I'm going to be demoing a lot of it. You'll see there's going to be a mixture of both regular CloudFormation, and then maybe you'll see a little bit of the SAM shortcuts to make developing serverless applications a little bit easier. Right, so here's the first template. And I've pre-deployed all these because, as everyone knows, sometimes in demos, live demos don't go too well. But we'll demo some of the command line stuff to demonstrate some of the failover activity. So here I've just defined a global table. and we have as a hash key a UUID. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing with that UUID when we get to the command line as well. And what you'll see the key here is, in our case, for our replicas, we're doing 2 replicas. And like any good CloudFormation practitioner, I'm using this all via parameters so that we can reuse these templates. Right. So in my case, region 1 will be US East 1, and then region 2 will be US West 2. Right? So we're going East Coast and West Coast. Make sense so far?
Yep.
It does.
Cool. And then the next piece now is we have to deploy that EventBridge environment. So the way that we do that with EventBridge, it's going to be a 2-step process. So you'll see on the left side, I've actually got 2 different CloudFormation templates. So bear with me. There's a lot in this one, but we can walk through it. Right. So the first one is we're going to configure the EventBridge bus. If you remember, there were those 3 flavors of EventBridge: default, custom, and SaaS. So by defining it this way, again, very simple, I'm defining a custom bus. And in this case, I'm just calling it global demo as an example. And then if you remember, attached to the bus is a rule. And this rule is what defines which targets get invoked. Right. So in this case, I've put a little, it's going to search for a key value attribute of type demo, right? And assuming that that demo is in the payload, and again, in the demo later, I'll show you where this comes in, we will invoke this function. Right? And we're going to define that function below. Follow me so far, guys?
Got it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So again, I know that maybe not everyone does it this way. When I develop my application, I'm pretty explicit about everything. So here's an IAM role for my Lambda function. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this one, but this is essentially my assume role policy or assume role policy document. And then here are different permissions that I'm going to allow for my function. Again, if you remember with your IAM roles, we do least privilege. So you have to explicitly say what we're going to allow. So these are some CloudWatch log and CloudWatch insight policies. And then here's the one that's more important for our use case, is going to be the DynamoDB. Right, so I'm going to pass in the ARN of that global table that I just built. And then I'm going to give my Lambda function these 8 permissions. Realistically, right now, we're just going to use the put item. And I think we're going to use the scan it sometimes. But these are the permissions that my function are allowed to do. Right, and then here's my Lambda function. So I'm going to define my Lambda function. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to point to my local source directory, which is right here on the left. And you'll see I've got 2 libraries that I wrote, along with a Lambda function, which is what I'm pointing to here, the handler. And then I'll actually have 2 helper files, which I'm going to use as part of the demo to demonstrate the capability. And then the last thing is I'm injecting an environment variable because I want to let my Lambda function know which DynamoDB table to write to. So this is just a little bit of CloudFormation, I guess, functions to extract the table name from my table ARN. Right here, you'll see I'm explicitly defining my log group and the permissions. So the permission is important because we want to ensure that EventBridge has permission to invoke my function. And here you'll see that it's the EventBridge rule that is triggering my function. Cool, make sense so far?
It does.
One more step, and then we'll get to some demo, and then we'll do an actual failover. All right, the last one. So what we did so far is I did a SAM deploy of my DynamoDB table, my DynamoDB global table. Now I'm going to do a SAM deploy of this EventBridge regional bus. So what's going to happen is I'm going to do a deploy in US East 1 first. I'll do a deploy in US West 2. And again, I'll show you the scripts to do these deployments. And then once I have my US East EventBridge bus and my US West 2 EventBridge bus, now I can create my global endpoint. So that's what this one is. And so what we do is I'm going to skip down. There's really 3 components for doing it. The first is we want to create an alarm, right? So we want to know, if you remember in that diagram, there was that alarm that indicated, is my happy path, right? So is my EventBridge in US East 1 still healthy, or is it not healthy, right? And so this is just an alarm that will define it. And this all comes actually, I've put in the reference here, in one of our provided templates. Right? So all of this is provided for you already. So I've just cut and paste their code into here, right? So we're defining an alarm, and then we define a Route 53 health check using that alarm, right? So you'll see we set a name, we're creating a a metric. We're in this region, and here's just some additional metadata, right? But ultimately, we're using that alarm. Okay, so this is a role that I'm going to need. These are permissions, but again, you guys can look at the code in that later. But here's the global endpoint, right? So there's a couple of things that's interesting here. The first one is that routing config. If you remember, there was happy path or sad path, right? And so you want to define your failover configuration. So in the primary, we're saying, what's the health check that says that US East 1 is healthy, right? And that's the one that we had just defined above. And again, it's provided in an S3 bucket for you guys. And then the second one is then to say, if my health check says we're not healthy, where should I route those requests to? And in this case, it would be secondary region. Again, I'm passing this as a confirmation parameter. Right? And in our case, this would be to US West 2. So we're gonna say that our replication state is enabled, and these are the two event buses that we had created in the previous step, right? One in US East 1, and one in US West 2. So I know I kind of went through that quickly. Does that you guys make sense, guys? Any questions you guys have?
Yeah. So I noticed that the failover takes one parameter is your primary, you have a secondary. Can you have more than that, or you can just have just two paths?
Yeah, that's a good question that I didn't actually think about before this. I believe the answer is just primary and secondary. I could be wrong. So maybe in the show notes we can put a little caveat to correct if I make a mistake on that statement.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, very cool.
All right. So again, I don't know if people care to see this, but I'll just show you real quick some of the deployment scripts, and then we'll do a quick demo of us what this looks like in action. And what I'll also show you is the data that's being written to that DynamoDB global table.
Okay, good.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I like to do is the way that I do these is a lot of people tend to write lots of scripts. For me, I find makefiles to make it very easily repeatable, and it makes my commands composable. So you can kind of look through this. Again, I have a code repo, but this is the way that I do these deployments. So for example, I could just do like a make DDDB, and it will run the package and deploy. And here you'll see I'm just packaging and deploying my DynamoDB template.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I parameterize all this. Likewise for EventBridge. So here you'll see I've made it so that I could do a make EB or EventBridge, and it'll deploy both regions. If I wanted to, I could deploy one region at a time. Right.
Yeah.
So here in this command, I'm doing both the package and deploy, and this will deploy to US East 1 in my case. And then here in EB region 2, if I do a make EB region 2, it'll deploy to US West 2. Or again, if I wanted to do a make EB, it'll do it to both regions sequentially. And then as we walk through, if I do a make EBG, this would be the global template, right? And then this will create the health check, the Route 53 health check, the alarm, and then it'll create the EventBridge global endpoint. Okay, cool. Makes sense.
Cool. Yes. I love that you're using a makefile. This is awesome. I mean, of course you can use bash scripts, but I like makefiles too.
Yeah, I do plenty of bash scripts as well, but I like to compose a lot of my commands. So now I'm sure all of you want to see how this works. I've got a bunch of sample data already presented in here. So let me show you the DynamoDB table, right? So I've got two windows up. So let's see if Chrome is kind to me, right? And so what I've done is the orange one above is US West 2, and the green one is US East 1, right? So if I actually go to like my Lambda function here, you'll see I'm in Northern Virginia. And let's see if I can make it easy to toggle between the two windows. So hopefully as a viewer, this is not too hard to follow. But here you'll see I'm in Oregon, US West 2, right? So just kind of trying to make it clear and represent which region I'm in. And I'll try to, as we go through the demo, I'll make sure I point it out. One thing that I'll point out as well is, so let's just filter on this just so that you guys are focused on what we need to see. Here you'll see that this is a DynamoDB global table, right? So, and you should expect that we see the same thing. So here's the view in US East 1, and we see 14 items, so fingers crossed if the demo gods are kind to me. In US West 2, we also see 14 items, and let's do just a quick validation. So if I look for this UUID, and I do another search here, which I think is the first item, right? And you'll see US West 2 and US West 2. Okay. So what we now want to do is I'm gonna emit an event. So this is going to be a happy path event, and I'll show you how I validate that. So
Say we're getting close on time.
Okay. All right. So let's do this. I have a directive for. So I'm gonna do a health check and get the stat. So false basically means I'm not failed over, which means I'm operating at a US East 1. So let's do a local test, right? So what I'm gonna do here is I'm going to put an event in my global bus. And if you remember before, I had that rule with the filter where type was demo, right? And so this is basically telling you I'm gonna send it to a particular target rule, and my message is just hello world.
Got it.
And what I did was I'm just doing a quick validation to make sure I didn't have any failed entry counts.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is this UUID is going to be what I'm going to call an idempotence token, right? So if I go to US East 1, I should be able to refresh this. Now I have 15 items. If I do a quick search, here's the one that I just sent. And you'll see that it's coming from US East.
US East 1, yeah.
Right?
Oh, wow.
So if I also go now to my my US West 2 side, 15 items, and again it says US East 1.
Cool.
So let me do this. I'm going to invert. So I believe it was inverted. I'm going to convert. So now you'll see I've failed over my health check. Now I know we're running up on time. It does take a few minutes. If you'll humor me, so this is what I had done before. So I failed it over for a certain period of time, and then you essentially will wait 3 minutes for this health check to flip. So what will happen is this will flip from healthy to unhealthy, which you'll see an example of this earlier today, and it goes red.
Right. Yeah, what we're waiting on right now is really just the system to check, and it'll do a number of checks. Once it's like, okay, this one's unhealthy, then it's going to fail over.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And then what will happen is I can run the same command, but now I'm going to use the same idempotence token, and it should flip in DynamoDB. So what I'll do is I'll show you. I have 2 commands. One is to test and generate a new item. And then you'll see this test ID is I'm going to insert an idempotence token, right? And here you'll see I'm going to do a little bit of trickery and add this token at the bottom here, right? And so this way we're going to reuse the same the same item, DynamoDB. Okay. This will unfortunately take
Hey, it's unhealthy.
Unhealthy.
So we're good.
Sad path time.
If the demo gods are kind to me, I will do an ID. Okay, so now let me just explain what I just did there. So I inserted it with the same token. So I would expect this one to now update from US East 1 to US West 2, right? So I'm going to guess that it won't be kind, but we'll see. We'll cross our fingers. It was kind to me.
Was.
So now you see it updated to US West 2. So just to prove that I'm not hacking and cheating here, I will show you really quick the Lambda function code, right? So this is the same code running in US East 1 and US West 2. And you'll see that I'm pulling the region from the environment in my Lambda function. So I'm not like kind of cheating and putting it in the payload and using that. So this is basically saying if I'm a Lambda function running in US East 1 or a Lambda function running in US West 2, I'm pulling that from the environment. And here you'll see that I then inject it into the payload before I write into DynamoDB.
Very cool.
That's really cool.
Exciting.
So the cool thing here is without doing anything, I was able to write to my global table from either US East 1 or US West 2 automatically because EventBridge was able to detect that, in this case, a simulated failure of US East 1 and moved it over to US West 2.
That's super cool, man. And I love how much easier to get. Again, I'm an old infrastructure guy used to doing 3-tier architecture. And while we could have done this, it would have been much more painful, right? Like this is so much easier and efficient.
Yeah.
Very cool. So how can we get our hand on this demo code?
Yeah, I'll put it in. I already have it in a GitHub repository. I'll share that with the team, and then you guys can get it out of the show notes.
That's great.
Exciting. I can't wait to play with it. How about you, Chad?
Yeah, man. I'm gonna give up my old ways and go serverless. It's the cool way to do it these days.
Yeah, and again, I hope that you guys can play with the code and get comfortable with it, and kind of start to build your own applications out of this. That'd be great.
This is awesome. I really appreciate the demo, man, and you spending time to show us how all this works.
Cool, my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Iggy. Yeah, and if our audience wants to contact you, do you have social media, maybe Twitter or something, where they can reach out to you and ask questions or anything?
Yeah, so I do have that in the. I think I have it in my deck here.
All right.
Yeah, so I have it on Twitter, hpark. I have a Medium account at my first name. Again, it's spelled Heeki, but it's pronounced Higgy, and then LinkedIn as well.
All right.
Higgy, we really appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time, man.